You've embarrassed this family long enough.
I built everything on my own. What are you talking about?
No, you made yourself a liability.
I'm your daughter.
You're nothing.
My mother looked me in the eyes and said, "You're nothing." That same night, she helped destroy my company and left me homeless with my son. But what she didn't realize was she had just created the woman who would take everything back. My name is Evelyn Foster, and 3 months ago, I was the kind of woman people in Chicago liked to call unstoppable. At 34, I had built my company, Verdant Living, from nothing but a borrowed desk and a stubborn belief that honesty could still win in business. I wasn't the loudest CEO in the room, but I was the one people trusted. I stood at 5'7", lean from years of running on caffeine and deadlines, with dark brown hair I rarely had time to style, and sharp eyes that missed very little. People often described me as composed, controlled, but that was learned. Years ago, after my father died suddenly in a financial scandal that nearly destroyed our family name, I made a quiet promise to never lose control again. That night, control slipped through my fingers anyway. It started with a call from Jacob Reed, my operations manager, and the closest thing I had to a right hand. Jacob was 38, tall and slightly hunched from years behind screens, with messy blonde hair and a habit of speaking too fast when he was nervous. He had been with me since the early days, loyal to a fault. "Evelyn, something's wrong," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked, already opening my laptop. "Our accounts, frozen. Payment processors flagged us. There's a fraud claim circulating." I laughed at first, not because it was funny, but because it didn't make sense. Verdant Living was clean, painfully clean. But then the emails started coming in. Contracts suspended, orders cancelled. A major retail partner citing reputational concerns. Within 30 minutes, everything I had spent years building began collapsing like it had been waiting for a signal. "Who filed the claim?" I asked. "I don't know," Jacob said. "But it's coordinated, too fast." That was the last real conversation I had with him. By morning, Jacob was gone. Phone off, apartment empty. No explanation. And I knew this wasn't random. Later that afternoon, I noticed someone watching me outside the office building. Daniel Brooks. He was a journalist, early 40s, tall, sharp-featured, always dressed like he was halfway between a press conference and a courtroom. Dark hair streaked with grey at the temples, calm but relentless eyes. Daniel had a reputation in Chicago for dismantling powerful people, one article at a time. He wasn't cruel, but he was thorough. And once he started digging, he didn't stop. He didn't approach me, he just stood there, observing. That scared me more. By evening, the story had already begun spreading online. Local CEO under investigation for supply chain fraud. I drove home in silence, my mind racing through possibilities I couldn't connect. When I walked into my apartment, the only thing that made sense was Liam. My son was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, completely focused on a drawing. Liam was 7, small for his age, with soft brown hair and wide, thoughtful eyes that always seemed to be searching for something good in the world. He was gentle in a way that made you want to protect him from everything. "Mom, look," he said, holding up the paper. It was a house, big windows, flowers outside, a bright sun in the corner. "Our perfect house," he said proudly. I smiled, even though something in my chest tightened. "Yeah, buddy," I whispered. "Perfect." My phone buzzed. I almost didn't check it, but I did. From Margaret Foster, my mother. Margaret Foster was the kind of woman people admired from a distance. Elegant, always perfectly dressed, late 60s, silver hair styled with precision. She spoke softly, but every word carried weight. After my father's scandal, she rebuilt the Foster name through charity, influence, and control. Especially control. The message was short. Evelyn, do not contact me again. You've made your choices. The family will not be associated with this. I read it twice, then a third time. And in that moment, everything became clear in the worst possible way. This wasn't just a scandal. It was a decision, a deliberate one. I looked at Liam, still holding his drawing, still believing in something stable, something safe. And for the first time that day, I was afraid I couldn't give that to him anymore. The next morning, I stopped reacting and started digging. I sat alone in my office, the same glass-walled space that used to feel like proof I had made it. Now it felt exposed. Every email, every contract, every invoice, I pulled them all up and started tracing the damage line by line. That's when I saw it. A contract that didn't belong. It was buried deep in our vendor system, signed under Verdant Living's name, approved with my digital signature, but I had never seen it before. The supplier listed was a company called Green Source Alliance. On paper, they provided sustainable raw materials. In reality, their certifications were incomplete, their addresses vague, and their pricing inconsistent with anything we had ever approved. Someone had inserted them into my company. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. That wasn't a mistake. That was a setup. By noon, I had followed the payment trail far enough to see something worse. Green Source Alliance wasn't independent. It was linked, quietly, cleverly, to a non-profit shell tied to the Foster Foundation. My family's foundation. The realization didn't feel like shock. It felt like confirmation. That's when Victoria called. My sister never called unless it served a purpose. Victoria Foster was 37, older than me by 3 years, tall and effortlessly elegant, with honey blonde hair, always styled to perfection, and a smile that could switch from warm to cutting in seconds. She had built her life on influence, not creation. Where I built things, Victoria controlled rooms. Growing up, she had learned early that approval was currency, and she had never stopped collecting it. "Evelyn," she said softly, like nothing had happened. "I've been hearing things. I'm worried about you." I almost laughed. "I don't need concern," I said. "I need answers." She paused just long enough to sound thoughtful. "I might be able to help," she said. "There are people involved in this situation you don't understand yet. Donors, partners. If you push too hard, you could make things worse." There it was. Not support. Control. "I already know enough," I said. "I know where the contracts lead." Another pause. Longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, just slightly. "Then you should be very careful what you do next." She hung up before I could respond. By afternoon, things escalated. An email arrived from an anonymous sender. No name, no signature, just a subject line. "You're looking in the right place." Attached were internal documents, copies of financial transfers, consulting invoices, and correspondence logs. The same shell entities appeared again and again. Foster Foundation affiliates, indirect payments, quiet pressure campaigns. And then, one file stopped me cold. An email. From Victoria. Sent to one of our largest retail partners. It warned them that Verdant Living was under investigation for supply fraud. That continued partnership could damage their reputation. That stepping away now would be the responsible decision. She signed it. Victoria Foster, Advisor, Foster Foundation. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. I felt something colder. By early evening, I got a message from Leonard Hayes, my former corporate attorney. Leonard was in his early 60s, slightly overweight, always dressed in conservative suits that made him look older than he was. He had been my legal backbone for years, steady, cautious, the kind of man who believed rules existed for a reason. We met in a quiet cafe across town. He didn't sit down right away. "Evelyn," he said, lowering his voice, "you need to stop." "Stop what?" I asked. "Looking into this," he said. "You're stepping into something bigger than your company." "I already am in it," I replied. He looked at me for a long moment, like he wanted to say more. Then he shook his head. "I can't represent you anymore," he said. "For your sake, walk away while you still can." And just like that, he was gone. No explanation, no backup, just silence. By nightfall, the fallout was undeniable. 3 major partners had suspended contracts. 2 investors pulled out. Our payment processor extended the freeze indefinitely. I stood in my office, watching emails stack faster than I could open them. Apologies, withdrawals, distance. And across the city, I could already see it happening. Victoria was stepping in. Interviews, statements, carefully worded concern about protecting the integrity of the Foster name. She wasn't just destroying me, she was replacing me. I didn't call ahead. By the time I pulled up to the Foster estate, the sky over Chicago had already turned that dull grey that makes everything feel colder than it is. The house hadn't changed. White stone, tall windows, perfectly trimmed hedges. It looked like stability. It always had. Inside, it felt like judgment. I was led into the sitting room by Charles Whitaker, the family's longtime butler. Charles was in his early 70s, thin but upright, with neatly combed silver hair and a face that had learned to hide emotion behind professionalism. He had worked for our family longer than I had been alive, but today his eyes lingered on me just a second too long, like he knew something I didn't want confirmed. "Your mother will be with you shortly, Miss Evelyn," he said quietly. Miss Evelyn. Not Evelyn. Not anymore. I sat there for nearly 20 minutes before she walked in. Margaret Foster didn't rush for anyone. She entered like she always did, controlled, elegant, dressed in a cream silk outfit that looked effortless, but probably cost more than my monthly payroll used to. Her posture was perfect, her expression neutral, her presence absolute. At 68, she hadn't lost any of the authority that rebuilt our family name after my father's scandal. If anything, she had sharpened it. "Evelyn," she said, as if I were an interruption. I stood up, my hands already clenched. "You knew," I said. No greeting, no hesitation. Her eyes didn't flicker. "I suspected," she replied calmly. "There's a difference." "Victoria is behind this," I said. "The contracts, the emails, the pressure. She's destroying my company." Margaret walked past me and sat down, crossing her legs with quiet precision. "You're speaking emotionally," she said, "not strategically." I felt something in me tighten. "I'm telling you the truth." "And I'm telling you," she said, finally looking at me, "that truth is rarely useful without control." That was when I understood. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't misunderstanding. This was alignment. "You're choosing her," I said. Margaret didn't answer immediately. She didn't need to. Her silence said enough. "Victoria understands what's at stake," she said after a moment. "The family name, the foundation, the networks we've spent decades building. You have always been more impulsive." Impulsive. I almost laughed. "I built a company from nothing," I said. "I protected it. I kept it clean." "And in doing so," she replied coolly, "you made yourself vulnerable." I stared at her. "You're letting her destroy me." "No," Margaret said softly. "I'm letting the situation resolve itself." "That's the same thing," She tilted her head slightly, studying me. Evelyn, she said, when one part of a structure becomes unstable, you don't reinforce it. You remove it before it compromises everything else. The words landed slowly, deliberately. You're calling me a liability, I said. She didn't hesitate this time. Yes. The room went very quiet. I'm your daughter, I said. And I am responsible for more than just one child, she replied. You've made choices that put the entire family at risk. That makes you difficult to protect. Difficult. Disposable. The realization hit harder than anything else that day. So that's it? I asked. You're cutting me off? Margaret stood. The family will not be associated with your business moving forward, she said. You'll receive formal notice. Formal notice. Like I was a contract being terminated. I didn't remember walking out, but I remembered what happened next. By the time I got back to my apartment, the locks had already been changed. A property manager stood in the hallway. Daniel Carter, mid-40s, average height, nervous energy, the kind of man who avoided eye contact when delivering bad news. I'm sorry, he said quickly. We were instructed, lease termination, immediate effect. By who? I asked. He hesitated, then looked away. I didn't need him to answer. Inside, my phone buzzed again. A banking notification. Account access revoked. Not just my main account, all of them, including one I hadn't touched in years, a private account my father had quietly set up before everything fell apart. A safety net. Gone. That's when Liam spoke. He had been standing behind me, quiet the whole time. Mum, he said softly, holding onto my sleeve. I turned. His eyes were wide, confused in a way that hurt more than anything else that day. Grandma doesn't love us anymore? He asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because for the first time, I didn't know how to lie to him. That night, Charles found me. I was sitting in my car in the parking garage, staring at nothing. He knocked gently on the window. When I rolled it down, he didn't look like a butler anymore. He looked like an old man who had seen too much. You shouldn't stay here, he said quietly. I don't have anywhere else, I replied. He nodded slowly, then handed me a small envelope. There's some cash, he said, and a contact for a short-term place. It's not much, but it's something. Why are you helping me? I asked. He gave me a sad smile. Because I remember when you were the only one in that house who said thank you. Then he stepped back, and just like that, I was no longer part of the foster family. The first night, I told Liam it was temporary. By the third night, I stopped saying it out loud. We folded the back seats of my SUV down flat and turned it into something that could pass as a bed if you didn't look too closely. The leather still smelled faintly like the life we had lost. Clean, expensive, controlled. Now it smelled like blankets, fast food wrappers, and fear I tried not to show. Are we camping? Liam asked the first night, his voice soft but hopeful. I forced a smile. Yeah, buddy, just a little adventure. He nodded, accepting it the way children accept things they don't fully understand. By morning, we had a routine. We drove to the Chicago Public Library downtown, a massive glass building that felt like the last place in the city where no one asked questions. That's where we met Ms. Harper. Emily Harper was in her early 50s, tall and slightly stooped, with curly grey hair pulled into a loose bun and reading glasses that slid down her nose when she smiled. She had the kind of calm presence that made children trust her immediately. Years ago, she had been a school teacher before budget cuts forced her into library work, but she never lost the instinct to protect kids. She noticed Liam on the second day. "Hey there," she said gently, kneeling beside him. "What do you like to read?" "Spaceships," Liam said without hesitation. That made her smile. "Well," she said, standing up, "I think I know exactly where to look." From that day on, she always had something ready for him: books, drawing paper, even snacks she pretended were extra. She never asked about me. That was her kindness. While Liam read and drew, I sat across the room, sending out applications. Dozens, then hundreds. Emails, calls, follow-ups. Nothing came back. Not even rejections. Just silence. By the end of the first week, I realized something worse than failure. I was being avoided. By night, we parked in different places to avoid attention. Supermarket lots, quiet side streets, anywhere with enough light to feel slightly safe. That's when I started noticing him. A man. Always at a distance. Mid-40s, average height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. His face was hard to read, but his posture wasn't. Still. Watchful. Patient. The first time, I thought it was coincidence. The second time, I paid attention. By the third time, I knew he was following us. I didn't tell Liam. He had already started calling the car something else. "This is our spaceship," he said one night, wrapping himself in a thin blanket. I looked at him through the rear-view mirror. "A spaceship?" "Yeah," he said, smiling. "We're just waiting to go somewhere better." Something in my chest cracked quietly. "Yeah," I whispered. "Somewhere better." The money ran out faster than I expected. Gas, food, small things that added up until there was nothing left to count. I checked my wallet one night under the dim overhead light. $42. That was all. I stopped eating full meals after that. Liam didn't notice, or pretended not to. Then came the cough. At first it was small, just a little scratch in his throat. He said it didn't hurt. He smiled through it the way kids do when they don't want to worry you. But I saw it. I heard it getting deeper, rougher. By the fifth night, it was worse. By the seventh, I knew something was wrong. "Mom, I'm okay," he said, even as he curled up tighter under the blanket. I reached back and touched his forehead. Warm. Too warm. I pulled my hand back slowly, trying to keep my face calm. "It's just a cold," I said. A lie, but it was the only thing I had left to give him. That night, the man appeared again. Closer this time. Standing near the edge of the parking lot, just far enough to pretend he wasn't watching. But he was. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I realized we weren't just alone. We were being watched. And I didn't know why. By the eighth night, I couldn't pretend anymore. Liam wasn't just coughing, he was struggling. His breathing had changed. It came in short, uneven pulls, like each breath had to fight its way out of his chest. His small body curled into itself in the back seat, the blanket barely rising with each inhale. "Mom, it hurts," he whispered. That was the moment fear stopped being quiet. I didn't think. I just drove. The emergency room lights cut through the rain like something distant and unreachable. I parked crooked, barely remembering to shut the engine off before running around to the back. When I lifted Liam, he felt too light, too hot. Inside, the ER was chaos, bright lights, tired faces, voices layered on top of each other. That's where I met Dr. Aaron Patel. He was in his early 30s, slim, dark hair slightly disheveled, exhaustion written into the lines under his eyes. But his voice was steady, precise, the kind of doctor who hadn't yet learned how to detach completely. He took one look at Liam and didn't hesitate. "Get him into a room," he said. For 10 seconds, I thought we were safe. He listened to Liam's chest, his expression tightening. "Severe pneumonia," he said quietly. "He needs oxygen, IV antibiotics. We need to admit him." Relief hit me so hard my knees almost gave out, until they sent me to admissions. The woman behind the glass was Linda Graves, mid-50s, short, neatly dressed, her expression practiced into something neutral and distant. She spoke like someone who had repeated the same conversation 1,000 times and learned not to feel it anymore. "Insurance?" she asked. "I don't have active coverage," I said. "Deposit required," she replied, already sliding the machine toward me. I handed over my card. Declined. She tried again. Declined. I felt the room closing in. "My son can't breathe," I said. "They said he needs to stay." Linda lowered her voice slightly, as if that made it kinder. "We can prescribe medication and discharge him," she said, "but admission requires payment." Discharge. Into the storm. Into the car. Behind me, I heard a voice. "Ma'am, we should keep him." I turned. It was a nurse, Sophie Reynolds, early 20s, pale, red hair tied back in a loose ponytail, freckles across her face. She looked young, too young for this kind of decision, but her eyes were sharp with concern. "He's not stable," she insisted. Linda didn't even look at her. "Policy," she said flatly. Sophie hesitated, then stepped back. Helpless. That word echoed louder than anything else. I carried Liam out myself. The rain hit hard, cold and relentless, soaking through my clothes in seconds. He didn't even react. That scared me more. As I reached the car, I noticed someone standing near the entrance. A man holding a phone. Filming. Mid-30s, average build, hoodie pulled up, face half hidden, but his posture was unmistakable. Curious. Detached. Like this was content. For a second, I wanted to scream. Instead, I opened the car door and laid Liam down as gently as I could. The doors closed. The noise faded. And I broke. Not quietly. Not controlled. I gripped the steering wheel and felt something inside me collapse completely. I had nothing left. No money, no help, no time. For the first time in my life, I thought about doing something illegal. Breaking into somewhere, stealing medication, anything. Because what kind of system tells a mother to watch her child suffer because she can't pay? I looked at Liam in the rearview mirror. His breathing was worse now, shallow, faster. And that's when the last option hit me, the one I had been avoiding. My family. The same people who destroyed me. The same people who chose to let this happen. I wiped my face, started the engine, and gripped the wheel. "I'm sorry," I whispered. I didn't know if I was saying it to Liam or to myself. But I knew one thing. I was going back. Not because I trusted them, because I didn't have a choice. I had just started the engine when the headlights cut through the rain beside me. A black Bentley rolled to a slow, deliberate stop. For a second, I thought it was security coming to move me along. That would have made sense. Everything else tonight hadn't. Then the rear door opened. A woman stepped out, calm, composed, completely untouched by the storm. Her name was Clara Whitmore. She looked to be in her early 50s, tall and slender, with sharp cheekbones and silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a precise knot. Her coat was dark, tailored, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. But it was her eyes that stood out, steady, analytical, the kind that measured people in seconds. She walked straight to my window and knocked once. Not hesitant, not aggressive, certain. I lowered it just enough to hear her over the rain. "Evelyn Foster," she said. Not a question. I froze. "I represent Mr. Arthur Kane," she continued. "He's been looking for you." I almost laughed. "You have the wrong person," I said. Clara didn't move. 10 years ago," she said calmly, "a black sedan went off the Franklin Bridge during a storm. You climbed down after it. You pulled the driver out before emergency services arrived." The memory hit like cold water. Broken glass, slippery metal. Someone bleeding, barely conscious. "I didn't know who he was," I said quietly. "You weren't supposed to," Clara replied. "But he never forgot." I stared at her. "Why now?" I asked. Her gaze shifted, just slightly, toward the back seat. "Because he only recently found your name," she said. "And because he's running out of time." Something in her tone changed. "He's dying," she added. Before I could respond, Liam coughed behind me. Weak, shallow. Clara's attention snapped fully to him. "Is that your son?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't hesitate. "Open the door." Within seconds, the Bentley's driver and another man were at my car. The second man introduced himself quickly as Dr. Marcus Hale. He was in his late 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark skin and close-cropped hair, wearing a long coat over medical scrubs. His movements were efficient, controlled, the kind of doctor who had seen too many emergencies to panic. He checked Liam right there in the back seat. "Severe pneumonia," he said immediately. "We don't have time to wait." For the second time that night, I heard those words. But this time, no one asked for a card. They moved fast. Liam was transferred into the Bentley, oxygen already being prepared from a compact medical kit. I followed without thinking, soaked, shaking, barely processing what was happening. The drive felt unreal. Dark roads, private gates, silence. When we arrived, the house wasn't flashy. It was worse. Quiet wealth, controlled power. Inside, they had a private medical wing. Dr. Hale worked with another nurse I hadn't met, efficient, precise, no wasted movement. Within minutes, Liam was on oxygen, IV lines placed, antibiotics started. I stood there, frozen, watching numbers on a monitor slowly rise. 92, 94, 96. Breathing, stable. For the first time in hours, I could breathe too. Clara stood beside me, watching, not Liam, me. "You don't ask many questions," she said. "I will later," I replied. "Right now, I just need him to be okay." She nodded once, as if that answer mattered. A few minutes later, she turned. "Mr. Kane is awake," she said. "He wants to see you." Arthur Kane wasn't what I expected. He was thinner than I imagined, late 60s, pale from illness, his once strong frame worn down by time. But his eyes, sharp, intelligent, and very much alive, locked onto me the moment I entered. "I remember your face," he said, voice rough but steady. I sat down slowly. "I remember you yelling at me not to die," he added, a faint smile forming. That surprised a breath of laughter out of me. He studied me for a moment. "Tell me something," he said. "If you had known who I was that night, would you have still jumped down there?" It wasn't a casual question. It was a test. I didn't hesitate. Yes. Why? Because you were there, I said, and you needed help. He held my gaze, then nodded. Good, he said quietly, because that answer meant something. Then his expression shifted, serious. I had my people look into your situation, he said. Your company didn't collapse on its own. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He already knew. Your family, he continued, is involved in something much larger than internal conflict. The room felt colder. I won't pretend I'm offering charity, he said. I'm offering something else. I leaned forward slightly. What? Responsibility, he said. When I'm gone, I want you to take control of what I've built. The words didn't land immediately. They just hung there. Heavy. Impossible. But for the first time since everything fell apart, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't rescue. This was something else entirely. Arthur Kane died 4 days later. He passed just before sunrise, in a room filled with quiet machines and softer shadows. I had sat beside him the night before, reading from one of the shipping journals he kept stacked by his bed. He said it helped him sleep, to hear something steady, something built. When Clara told me he was gone, I didn't cry immediately. Grief came later. First came responsibility. 2 days after the funeral, I sat in a high-rise law office overlooking Lake Michigan. That's where I met Harold Whitmore. Harold was in his early 60s, tall and angular, with a face that looked permanently set in concentration. His silver hair was perfectly parted, his suit immaculate. He spoke in short, precise sentences, the kind of lawyer who didn't waste words because he didn't need to. Theodore, Arthur Kane, left specific instructions, he said, correcting himself smoothly. Everything transfers to you. Everything. Controlling stake in Kane Logistics, liquid assets, property holdings, power. But it wasn't the money that froze me. It was the file. Thick, organized, damning. Inside were documents, financial trails, shell companies, email chains, all pointing back to one place. The Foster Foundation. My mother. My sister. They didn't just abandon you, Harold said calmly. They actively dismantled your company. I didn't speak, because now I had proof. The gala was exactly how I remembered. Gold lights, polished smiles, controlled conversations pretending to be warmth. The Chicago Charity Summit, hosted, as always, by the Foster Foundation. And this time, I walked in. Liam's small hand in mine. He wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders yet. I wore black, simple, sharp, intentional. The room noticed. They always do when something they buried comes back. Near the donor wall, I saw them. Margaret, Victoria. Unchanged. Perfect. Victoria recovered first. She moved towards me, smiling like nothing had ever happened. Her voice soft, controlled, calculated. Evelyn, she said. We've been worried about you. I almost admired the performance. Have you? I replied. She leaned in slightly, her smile tightening. This isn't the place, she whispered. We should talk privately. Behind her, Margaret approached more slowly, measured, composed. Family matters should remain private, she said. Private. That word again. Before I could respond, someone stepped closer behind me. Ms. Foster? I turned. Daniel Brooks, the journalist. Same sharp eyes, same quiet intensity. Early 40s, tailored coat, notebook already in hand. "Care to comment?" he asked. Of course he was here. Of course this was public. Victoria's expression shifted, just slightly. Then she leaned closer, her voice dropping low enough that only I could hear. "You really want to do this?" she said. "Because we can make things very difficult for you. Especially for him." Her eyes flicked toward Liam. Something in me went still, cold. "Don't," I said quietly. She smiled. That was her mistake. Because in that moment, I stopped being her sister. "I think I will comment," I said, turning back to Daniel. The room quieted, not completely, but enough. "Everything being said about my company is false," I said clearly. "And I have evidence that the Foster Foundation was directly involved in fabricating those claims." Silence. Not polite silence. Real silence. Margaret's expression didn't break, but Victoria's did. Just for a second. "That's a serious accusation," Daniel said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." I reached into my bag and handed him a single document. Not everything, just enough. A financial transfer. A name. A connection that couldn't be explained away. "I'll be releasing the rest through legal channels," I added. That's when I felt it. The shift. Not victory, but momentum. After the gala, everything moved fast. Calls, messages, legal filings. Harold worked like a machine. But he wasn't alone. That's when Jacob came back. I didn't recognize him at first. He looked thinner, more tired, but his eyes were the same. Determined. "They made me disappear," he said quietly when we met. But I didn't stop looking. He placed a flash drive on the table. "More proof," he added. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. I didn't go after them with anger. I went after them with evidence. The investigation began quietly. Harold Whitmore coordinated everything from a glass-walled office that never seemed to sleep. But the real turning point came when he introduced me to Victor Lane. Victor was in his late 40s, average height, slightly disheveled in a way that suggested he cared more about numbers than appearances. His brown hair was always just a little out of place, his shirts never fully pressed, but his eyes were sharp, restless, obsessive. He had built a reputation as a forensic accountant who didn't stop until every dollar had a story. "They hid it well," he said, flipping through documents, "but not well enough." For weeks, Victor traced transactions through shell companies, consulting firms, offshore accounts. Piece by piece, the pattern formed. Money moved from the Foster Foundation into fake service contracts, then redirected into private assets tied to Victoria and her husband. And buried in those transactions, the fingerprints of my company's destruction. "This is enough," Harold said one night. "More than enough." So we moved. When the evidence was released, it didn't trickle, it detonated. Daniel Brooks published the first article. Clear, precise, unavoidable. Foster Foundation under investigation for financial misconduct and corporate sabotage. The city reacted fast, because this wasn't rumour anymore. It was proof. The arrests came 3 days later. It was raining again, I remember that. Margaret Foster was taken from the front steps of the foundation building, still composed, still dignified, even as agents escorted her into a waiting car. Victoria wasn't as controlled. She resisted, argued. Her voice sharp, breaking through the calm she had always relied on. For the first time, she looked afraid. The collapse was immediate. Board members resigned, donors pulled funding. The Foster name, once untouchable, became something people avoided saying out loud. High society didn't defend them, it studied them. The trial moved quickly. I testified once. No drama, no performance, just facts. What they did, how they did it, what it cost. I didn't look at them while I spoke. I didn't need to, because this wasn't about them anymore. They were convicted 6 weeks later. Fraud, money laundering, corporate sabotage. Sentences that matched the damage they caused. When reporters asked how I felt, I gave the only answer that was true. I didn't destroy them, I said. They did that themselves. And for the first time, I meant it. Rebuilding didn't feel like victory. It felt like work. Kane Logistics needed restructuring, compliance systems, ethical oversight, transparency at every level. I didn't rebuild it the way Arthur had. I rebuilt it better. Verdant Living came back too, not as it was, but as something smaller, cleaner, harder to corrupt. And then there was something else. The foundation I created. The Evelyn Foster Initiative. It funded emergency medical care for families who couldn't afford it, quietly, without conditions, without forms that asked how much your child's life was worth. Because I remembered that night. I always would. Liam's room was the last thing I finished. He chose everything himself. Deep blue walls, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. A bed too big for him now, but one he could grow into. "This is better than the spaceship," he said one night, lying on his back, staring up. I smiled. "Yeah," I said, "it is." But I never told him the truth. That I still thought about that car sometimes. Not as a failure, as a reminder. Because in the end, this was never about revenge. Revenge burns fast. It consumes everything, even the person holding it. Justice is different. It builds. It restores. It leaves something behind that didn't exist before. I didn't get my old life back. I built a new one. Stronger. Cleaner. Ours. And that was enough. Sometimes I still ask myself, did I do the right thing? I chose justice, but not everyone would have. If you were in my place, would you expose your own family or stay silent? After what they did to my child, do they still deserve forgiveness? No middle ground. Tell me, justice or revenge? And if my story meant something to you, like, subscribe, and follow for more powerful stories.